some views. Here's a picture out of your lab book. Notice these hexagon-shaped structures right here. Didn't draw that very well. Let me try that again. Bup, 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 bup. There you go. And you can see some hexagon shapes over here. Dot, dot, dot. This is a low power. There's another one right there. So the the liver, when you see it, has very distinct, these are called lobules, six-sided. That's not important, but anyway, look at all the veins. Veins everywhere, 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 everywhere. Remember hepatic portal vein, carrying all the nutrients into the liver from the digestive organs. Notice also, let me erase all this, there's some very light green ducts right in here. These are for bile because the liver is where bile is made. That's part of the duct bile system. I mentioned the portal venules and veins. Remember that the liver is a big blood reservoir. The cells are called hepatocytes. So this is a low power. This is about a 4x of the liver right here. But what you're looking at down here is a 40x. And here is a liver cell right there. It's called a hepatocyte. And look at these little blood vessels. These are tiny capillaries right here. You should identify those as blood cells. These are tiny little capillary vessels. The liver's got a zillion little capillaries running through it. Also, there's some lymphatic cells in the liver, very important for phagocytosis and things like that. Okay. We care about bile, though. Get back over here. So, the liver has other functions. We're just going to talk about bile right now. I've already mentioned a bunch of them. Remember all the things we talked about in blood. Blood proteins and albumins and clotting proteins, and also there's some metabolic things related to iron storage, vitamin D, vitamin E. It goes on and on and on. Carbohydrate processing. I mean, the liver has over 200 functions. It's the busiest organ of the body almost. Okay, so hepatitis, cirrhosis, obviously problems in the liver. Hepatitis could be viral, maybe not. Cirrhosis is replacement of normal liver tissue with fatty tissue. It's a fatty liver, and it's generally associated with alcohol. By the way, chronic liver disease, not much to do about it once it happens, except maybe get a liver transplant. Wanted to point out, look at hepatitis B and C causes of chronic liver disease. Two major groups of viruses that cause it. So here's about 50% of chronic liver disease. Here's alcohol, and here's alcohol and hepatitis viruses, and that's like over 80% of chronic liver disease. Alright, wanted to point that out. Alright, so notice the liver up here. You can maybe just make out the entry of the hepatic portal vein over here. There's the gallbladder right there. This is the inferior vena that's in the way now. Inferior vena cava that's going to drain all the blood away from the liver. Okay. So, bile, and then we'll quit for this tape. About a liter a day. A good view again of where all this is happening. Let me point out liver up here. Here's liver. And remember, it's actually, let me draw it over all this. Remember, the stomach is sitting right over here. That's not a very good shot. There's the stomach. It's hiding most of the pancreas. But the liver is actually coming across this way, and you wouldn't see all that. Anyway, okay, let me get rid of that. All right, now, the bile is coming down from the liver. So, bile, it's going down, going down, going down. We get down over here. Now, remember, there's a good view of that sphincter. It's closed. Now, what's the bile going to do? Well, it can't go that way. It's made continuously from the liver. So what's it going to do? It's going to back up. It's going to back up. It's going to back up into the gallbladder. That's how the gallbladder gets bile for storage. Gallbladder's not making it. Now, what happens at the gallbladder is it concentrates the bile, it dehydrates it, takes the water out. That's going to make for very thick bile. When the gallbladder contracts, by the way, which is under the control of CCK hormone, contraction of the gallbladder, the bile goes out of the gallbladder and goes down that way to dump into the small intestine right here. Now, wanted to point this out. That's the hepatic duct coming from the liver. This is the cystic duct coming from the gallbladder. I'll talk about obstruction here in just a minute, but while I've got this drawing, let me point out that if anything is in the way, like a little gallstone right in here, which blocks all this, what's going to happen? Well, the bile is going to back up into these areas, and even more important is it backing up in the liver, because bile should not be backed up in the liver. It will eventually destroy the liver. And then, again, you have to have a liver transplant. Okay, bile, what is it? It's water. It's cholesterol bile acids. And when I mean acid, I don't mean like hydrochloric. I mean acids that have cholesterol, CHO. Like this guy right there. You can see the cholesterol molecule backbone. It also has bilirubin, bile pigments, green-brown color. The function, it's an emulsifier. It's the same reason why you would use dish detergent to clean fat off of your dinner plates. It emulsifies fats. It breaks the fats down into smaller globs. We'll talk about it more in a bit. You're looking at a surgical shot where they're taking the gallbladder off. That's called a cholecystectomy. There's the instrument they're using. There's the gallbladder. The liver, by the way, has been pulled upward because the gallbladder is on the underside of the liver. That is, you have to pull the liver up to see it even. Okay. Hormones involved here. Okay, I've mentioned CCK, which causes contraction of the gallbladder. Secretin, by the way, tells the liver to up bile production. Mentioned fatty livers, mentioned gallstones. Got a lot of pictures of gallstones here. Here is what they might look like. Here's a great x-ray with a bunch of them. Here is a colorized CAT scan with them. This is a color-enhanced x-ray with them, and here is a pretty good shot of just a diagram. And again, you can see some occluding the common bile duct there. And that surgery to remove the gallbladder, if you get recurrent gallstone production, is called a cholecystectomy. Symptoms: extreme pain. We need to finish up with the large intestine, and then we'll do the last video capture on chemical digestion to wrap the whole thing up. Alright, so we're down in the large intestine, and I've already shown you lots of simple columnar, so I'm not going to show you any more. The difference between simple columnar everywhere else and simple columnar here is there's a heck of a lot more goblet cells, which makes sense because you've got to have a lot of mucus to lubricate the large intestine for feces to move along. Okay, so the function of the large intestine is the complete absorption of water and a few electrolytes and elimination of feces. Let me go through the anatomy first, and we'll get back to the function here. Alright, so there are a couple of interesting anatomical things going on here. Number one, down here at the anus area, you see some veins right in here. They are called hemorrhoidal veins, interestingly enough, which tells you something about hemorrhoids, doesn't it? So these become enlarged, and they kind of pooch outward, forming a very uncomfortable mass. It's not tumorous. Basically, it's varicose veins of the anal area. There's a second thing interesting about the large intestine. There is a band. Well, look at the large intestine picture down here. All right, so let me take you through the parts of it. Cecum is in yellow. There's where the ileum comes in, and that's the ileocecal valve right there. Notice the appendix down here sticking off. Then we go into the colon. This is all colon right here, except it has different names. Ascending colon, transverse colon, hits the liver right there, bends, hits the spleen, bends again. Then we have descending colon. Then we have a kind of a S-shaped area, and it goes to the back of the body wall. Now remember, the large intestines are at the front of the body. If you just took your wall of your abdomen off, your large intestine would be visible. So back here, the large intestine has to take a turn to the back of the body. And then, of course, the last region right there is the rectum. So cecum, colon, the different parts of the colon, and the rectum. Now, let me erase all this. All right. So notice these odd little pouches that you see along the large intestine. They're called haustra. They're unique for the large intestine. And what causes these pouches to be here is what is called tinea coli, which is a strip of tissue. I'm going to draw it along, this strip. You can see it looks like a band, and it pulls the entire large intestine into these pouch-like structures. You can see that band right here, for example, and you see the band right there in between the two red lines. Back here to the anal canal, this area, there are a couple of sphincters. So you see here, and you see here. So internal anal sphincter, you can see in longitudinal section that muscle right there, and of course it goes around like that, all the way around, right? That's the internal sphincter. And then we go over to blue, and we have this outer tissue here, and it's going around the outside of the red. So you've got the external sphincter, and you've got the internal sphincter. And the internal sphincter is smooth muscle, parasympathetically controlled. And the external sphincter is voluntary. It's skeletal muscle. Okay. So, large intestine functions. Okay. I mentioned absorption. There's some vitamins that are produced also. Now remember that there are bacteria by the gazillions in feces. In fact, a third of feces is bacteria. And they're using a lot of the nutrients that you can't use up. And they produce some byproducts. Some of them are noxious and you don't like to smell them. But they also make some vitamins, like vitamin K. And those then can be absorbed by us. So we get a benefit of our bacteria. I already mentioned mass movement, so let me go down to the defecation reflex. All right. So look at the spinal cord right there. And let's start with feces right in here. And it's getting packed into the large intestine. So, because you're excreting, you're packing it in there all the time. And the rectum is going to expand, expand, expand with feces. Now, at some point, receptors for pressure, baroreceptors, are going to get stimulated. And these receptors are in blue. Let me change colors here. And the receptors now, again in blue, I'm going to do it in red, pick up this pressure, and they carry information to the spinal cord. You see it right there. This is the sacral area of the spinal cord, by the way. This defecation reflex, remember reflexes, automatic, unconscious, you can't control them. This is a spinal reflex. It doesn't involve the brain at all. Okay, now, motor neurons carrying information outbound to the smooth muscle of the wall of the large intestine to contract and compress, and the stuff is going to go down this way. In addition, there's more information going down over here. Now remember, the internal sphincter, this area right here, is involuntary smooth muscle, so it's part of this reflex. The one thing stopping you from releasing this feces is your conscious control. And remember, this is skeletal muscle voluntarily controlled. But of course, at some point in time, the messages going via this reflex to the smooth muscle and to the internal sphincter are going to become more intense, and you're going to lose control of your voluntary skeletal muscle. Now, some problems. Diarrhea versus constipation has to do with the amount of water absorption, too much, too little, into the blood. And what determines water absorption is the peristaltic rate. Slow peristaltic rate, that is, feces going through the large intestine too slowly, too much water absorbed, too little water left in the feces. Feces are hard and brittle, and it's hard to get out, and that's constipation. And the flip side is diarrhea. Gastroenteritis, just a vague term for inflammation, could be bacterial. Colitis, inflammation of the colon. Let me jump over here to this colostomy, because I think I got a picture coming out, and then I'll get to diverticulosis. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so we're now on the inside of the large intestine. And you know about sigmoidoscopies and colonoscopies. They go up with camera and lights and blah, 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 up the large intestine. That's what you're looking at over here, looking for polyps. There's one right there. Okay, so if you look down here at the bottom, you've got a resectioning of the large intestine due to cancer. It's been cut here. It's been cut there. That section has been taken out. And of course, you can't have feces just going out here, you know, into the peritoneal cavity. So this is a colostomy bag right there. They may at a later time resection this to this, depends on how much is taken out, how much cancer that is. I mean, how much intestines taken out. Sometimes people have a colostomy bag for a lifetime. The view up here is appendicitis. There's your appendix right there. There's an appendix right there. Okay, so I need to mention diverticulosis, and that takes us here. Okay, so I was just talking about cancer. So let me point out this picture. Here is colon cancer right there in the large intestine. Good view of where it would be taken out. We've talked about ulcers. We've talked about that. Talked about diarrhea and constipation. Mentioned colitis, pancreatitis, liver problems, gallstones. Talked about cystic fibrosis in the respiratory tract. Remember, cystic fibrosis is hereditary, and it's going to result in glandular oversecretion, which is why people with CF get a lot of respiratory diseases. Their mucus glands along the respiratory tract overproduce, and they can't, it obstructs the respiratory tract, and you can't breathe, and they get recurrent respiratory infections and all that. But cystic fibrosis people also get pancreatitis, and very often the pancreas overproducing its enzymes will damage the pancreas. Okay, so that leaves us with diverticulosis. All right, so look at this picture down here, and notice right over here on the large intestine, although it can also involve the small intestine. There are these odd little, look like bubbles, but they're not really. They're little extra pouches, like little extra rooms, almost like little closets off of the haustra of the large intestine. They are called diverticula. And the problem here is that these are full of bacteria, obviously. And these guys are out of the main flow. Now remember, feces is supposed to go down straight that way. Well, if the feces gets lodged in these little diverticula, the bacteria are kind of hidden off to the side, using nutrients, making gases and toxins and things like that. And this can cause a real problem, like diarrhea. And that is what diverticulosis is. Diverticulitis is the same thing, except it's worse. Okay, then the one thing you see over here is a hernia. I mentioned a hiatal hernia earlier. Well, here is an inguinal hernia. This is going to be mainly in men. There's a little weakened area of the wall right here. And it's actually where the testes come down through the back of the peritoneal cavity and drop down into the testes, into the scrotum. We'll talk about that in the reproductive system. So in both men and women, you have a hole here and you have a hole right over here. Now the hole on the right side over here has enlarged and a loop of the small intestine has pooched out. And this can cause discomfort, and the intestine can kind of loop and become gangrenous and da-da-da. And that's a inguinal hernia. Women can get them. It's rather rare in women because these inguinal canals are really meant for the testes to drop through the body wall, and women, that doesn't happen in women, obviously, or the ovaries stay inside. They still have that canal, but it's much smaller and it doesn't prone to a hernia. Okay, so here's another look at just losing weight, I guess we'll say. This is a lap band over on the left, where they've created a little band to create a tiny little stomach that fills up and you think you're full, blah, blah, blah. And over on the right side, you've got a resection from the stomach, from the duodenum. We've skipped the jejunum, and we've skipped most of the ileum, except for that little section right there. And so you get less absorption, which means less calories. Okay, so that takes us to the end, and we're going to start the last section on chemical digestion in the last tape.